8 hours. The White House had told us just on Thursday that the president thought that he would have 2 weeks to make this decision. Here comes the president.
Again, meeting with his national security team earlier today at the White House. Let's listen to the president.
Thank you very much. A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God. I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel, and God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
President Trump there at the White House, Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio also serving as his national security advisor, along with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth right there with President Trump announcing to the nation, similar to what he said in his post on social media not long ago, that the U.S. is now directly involved with Iran, striking 3 nuclear locations, Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan, 3 nuclear facilities that the U.S. had long been studying, as well as international observers around the world in tracking Iran's nuclear program and their desire perhaps one day to have a nuclear weapon. I want to bring in Mary Bruce. Let's go back to Mary at the White House. Mary, the president had warned Iran, come to the table. Let's negotiate some sort of a peace deal, that this current conflict must end. At last word, he said 2 weeks would be his deadline. We know that's turned out to be 2 days. We'll learn in the hours and days to come whether that was part of the strategy here. But this is a fairly risky move for this president, though tonight he says it's been a victory. He thanked U.S. forces who were involved, and he said if Iran does not end the wars and seek peace, tragedy for Iran will be even greater than what we've seen in the last 24 hours.
David, it is an extremely risky move, and no one knows really where this goes from here. Look, the president, we know, has long warned that Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon, but he also long was pushing for those negotiations. As you mentioned, it was just 2 days ago that the president announced after yet another meeting in the Situation Room that he was going to give himself this 2-week deadline within which to make this decision whether or not to strike Iran, in part because he thought there was, quote, a substantial chance of negotiations, that they would be able to get Iran back to the table. It is not clear still, even after hearing from the president just now, what changed his mind, what led him to believe there was no time left to waste, that the U.S. had to go ahead and get deeply involved in this conflict in a way that the president has also really promised the American people he would not. He campaigned on a promise to be a peacemaker and a unifier, to keep America out of these kinds of conflicts. And what's clear tonight is that the president is very much leaving open the door that there will be more of this. While he is hailing the strikes tonight as a huge success, he is also not ruling out additional military action, saying that there are many targets left, that they will act with precision, speed, and skill if needed. How all of this will ultimately end Iran's nuclear program is a huge question. And of course, David, Iran has promised a severe response if the U.S. were to be directly involved, as we now are.
And one quick follow-up to what you're reporting here, Mary. Obviously, you're watching ABC News live coverage at this hour. The president just addressing the nation, talking about the U.S. striking 3 Iranian nuclear sites, the president calling it a tremendous success. Speaking briefly with our John Carl earlier this evening before addressing the nation about this. And Mary, you've covered President Trump for some time. You've covered him as a candidate, his promises not to engage in the Middle East and in any more foreign wars. At the same time, he has long promised that Iran would not get a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, and David, just again 2 days ago, the White House, while saying that they were giving themselves this 2-week timeline, again stressed that Iran was very close to getting a nuclear weapon, saying that Iran had everything it needed to achieve a nuclear weapon, and that once the supreme leader gave the go-ahead, that it could be just a few weeks before Iran had that full capability. Clearly, something changed in the president's calculus to make him go ahead and make this decision tonight. It is a remarkable turn for a president who has avoided getting dragged into these kind of conflicts, and it is one that his presidency it will now define. That is for sure.
Our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, with us live here tonight. Mary, thank you. I want to bring in John Carl, our chief Washington correspondent. John, I was struck that you were able to connect with the president even before he addressed the nation tonight. Again, he was confident with what he had witnessed, what he'd been briefed on following this operation, and made it clear to the American people that all of the U.S. military involved in this operation is back out of that airspace and on their way home.
I think the most significant thing is I called him, really, David, just in the aftermath of learning about these attacks, within an hour of his speech that we just saw, and he picked up the phone. That was a measure of how eager he was to tout what he said in those words he said to me, a tremendous success tonight. He didn't want to talk about the details of the operation, about the very difficult questions, David, of what are the next steps? What happens with Iran? What happens with Iran's efforts to retaliate? We heard some of that in the speech just now when he said the attacks will be far greater and much easier if Iran does anything to the United States. But David, we are in a new phase here right now. I think it is without question the most consequential decision that we have ever seen Donald Trump make. And it's entirely unclear what direction it will go. Will it be consistent with his promise to end the forever wars? That's the argument that's being made tonight by the president's advisors. They're saying that what this has done is finally an American president has taken care of an Iranian threat that has bedeviled the United States for nearly a half a century. Finally, an American president has ended a threat that has killed a lot of Americans, as you heard the president mention, in the attacks on American troops, especially in Iraq. But the question is, did it end the threat, or did it create another new and more dangerous chapter in the U.S.-Iran conflict.
Yeah, no question it is a new chapter, John Carl. Bottom line here, the willingness to get on the phone with you signaled that the president was very pleased with the outcome of this operation tonight.
Very pleased with the outcome and eager to tell people that he is very pleased with the outcome tonight.
All right, John Carl, stick with us here for our live coverage. I want to bring in Martha Raddatz, our Chief Global Affairs Correspondent. And Martha, you had been on the air with us on World News Tonight all week long with your reporting. A couple of questions for you. We know B-2 bombers were used. Do we have any clarity yet on whether or not those bunker buster bombs, those 30,000-pound bombs, which had been tested before but never actually used in war, whether or not they were used in this operation?
That, but I can assume that they used those bombs because that's what it would take. And if the president is correct and they destroyed that facility, Fordo, with half a dozen bombs, half a dozen of those massive ordnance penetrators, then that is likely what they used. The Moab that has been used in Afghanistan and caves and such wouldn't have done the job, according to officials that I have spoken to. As you know, David, and we've talked about all week, those ordnance are basically down here by letting out, conking out. There was in concern about whether work. I'd say tonight was also about how.
All right, Martha, we're going to come back to you. Obviously, we're in live coverage mode and the audio a little tricky there. I want to bring in retired Colonel Steve Ganyard, also tracking the military aspect of this. And Steve, you heard Martha there report that likely they did use these 30,000-pound bombs, though the president in front of the country tonight did not say otherwise whether or not they did, in fact, use them.
Yeah, David, there's some unconfirmed reports that up to 6 of these so-called bunker buster bombs were used on the site at Fordo. Remember, that's the one that's so deeply buried, 200 to 300 feet underneath a mountain in central Iran. So we'll see what the president admits to or what the Pentagon's able to brief us on. Also, potentially, there was a use of Tomahawk cruise missiles to hit some of the sites in Natanz and Isfahan. So this is all very straightforward, all focused on the nuclear enterprise. Really important to note that the buildup within the region is unprecedented. There haven't been 3 carriers once the Ford comes in next week. There have not been 3 carriers in the region since 2003. So over 20 years, we haven't had this amount of U.S. military firepower in the region. So clearly what the president said tonight is this is not a one-off. If these Iranians don't come to the table, we are prepared to continue this and continue to hit targets.
And in fact, the president, Steve, saying if peace doesn't come quickly, we will go after other targets with speed and with skill. You bring up Fordo, and that was the nuclear location where we believe those bunker buster bombs would be used. Steve, just help explain to our audience how difficult that would be, how deep beneath the mountain there the nuclear facilities were actually located, and why Israel had for some time now been hoping that President Trump and the U.S. military would be part of this operation. Tonight they now are.
Yeah, David, these bunker buster bombs were originally developed for the North Korean threat. You remember we've talked about what goes on with the Kim regime and how they've buried their nuclear facilities well. So there are only 2 places in the world where this weapon is appropriate, North Korea and Iran. Because it's so deeply buried, you need a very heavy weapon. So it's a 30,000-pound weapon. Only 5,000 pounds of that is explosive. It's a hardened case that's designed to penetrate. It has a fuse that can actually count floors as it goes through down to these buried targets. So the only country in the world, or the only country in the world, at least in the free world, that has bombers is the United States. The Israelis only have fighters, and they don't have anything that can carry a weapon of this size and weight. So it really was up to the U.S. with this very specific weapon that's only carried on the B-2 bomber to take down these hardened, deep targets within Fordo.
And obviously, the reason why we think they were used tonight was because we have had it confirmed that the B-2 bombers obviously made that trip over the skies of Iran. And Steve, Martha had reported earlier in the week that these bunker busters have been tested but never used in war. So this would be a first tonight.
It would. They've been extensively tested, but no weapon's ever perfect. So we'll see if all of the weapons that are dropped actually went off. David, it's really a well-played deception plan by the White House and by the Pentagon. They've been putting out that, oh, we see B-2 bombers taking off from Missouri and they're heading towards Guam. Meanwhile, it seems that the B-2 bombers may have come the other way while nobody was looking and conducted these strikes. So After the Iranians were done with the last discussion with the Europeans, and they said, we're not really interested in further discussions, the president obviously made a decision that they aren't going to be serious, and until we go in and take out these sites, that the threat will remain, and the Israelis need our help.
Steve, let's talk about the Iranian airspace that the U.S. military entered tonight, because the president in recent days said, we control the Iranian airspace now. He said in so many words. The word we was what got so much attention. But in these recent days of the Israeli strikes on Iran, taking out military assets, but also their air defenses, that essentially Israel did control the airspace over Iran. This was a much different situation tonight, that the U.S. Was able to fly into the skies over Iran, and the U.S., the Pentagon, the White House surely knew that this was perhaps a window of opportunity, unlike what has been seen in years prior.
Yeah, David, if people may say, well, why do we need a stealth bomber if there's no air defenses? So the B-2 is very capable. You would fly it into, say, a China scenario where they would be looking for you on radar. It wasn't really required because the Israeli Air Force owns the skies over Iran. This part is not that surprising. You remember back in October of last year, David, when the Israelis struck Iran, we knew that they took out almost all of their air defenses. So we know that for months, Iran has been essentially blind and defenseless to any attacks from the air. And we've seen this over the past 8 or 9 days, where the Israeli Air Force has operated with impunity. What's really shocking and is extraordinary is the human intelligence that the Mossad has been able to develop, finding all those scientists, finding all those senior leaders, taking them out within the first few minutes of this war.
Steve Ganyard with us here tonight for our coverage. Steve, stick with us here. We'll come back to you, I'm sure. I want to bring in Matt Gutman also following our coverage tonight. And Matt, as you know, Benjamin Netanyahu in contact with President Trump, Israel tonight, saying that they were given a heads up. We also know that the prime minister has addressed the Israeli people just a short time ago. They had been hoping, Netanyahu had been hoping that President Trump would give the go-ahead for the U.S. To have direct involvement in Iran, and that's what's played out here tonight.
That's exactly what played out here, and this is something that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been hoping for, not just in the past 10 days since this campaign began, but for many, many years. He has been hoping, praying for a U.S. president to come to its aid, because Israel could do a lot of the work. They have one of the most capable fleets of air forces in the Middle East, possibly the world. But as Steve mentioned, they do not have bombers. They have fighter bombers. They can carry 2,000-pound bombs, but nothing greater than that. So they needed whatever bunker buster capability the United States has. They also needed refueling planes, right? They have a couple, but not the amount that can have essentially to transfer their entire air force from the theater around Israel directly over Iran, which is 2,000 kilometers away, about 1,500 miles or so, a little bit less. A source telling me also that the U.S. and Israel had war-gamed this. They had practiced this in the past year. That happened initially during the Biden administration. So this is not something that just came out of the blue, a plan that was recently devised. They have actively been working on this in a novel way over the past year. That source also telling me that they are confident that the damage done in Fordo specifically, but also the other sites, is, quote, irreversible. Now they anticipate that there will be some sort of Iranian reaction. There has to be some sort of retaliation, but it is the estimation among many in the Israeli defense and military establishment right now that is going to be measured and calculated, because the Iranian regime, David, wants to stay in power. Right now, they are fighting for their survival. One miscalculation with President Trump, with, as Steve noted, 3 aircraft carrier groups in the region, could be devastating for them. So the understanding is that they're going to do what they need to do, have some sort of response, and try to live to fight another day, David.
Matt Gutman with us here. Matt, thank you. I want to bring in our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, with us here. Matt brings up the point of any potential retaliation from Iran. The sun now coming up there behind you, Ian. First of all, the state of play in the region at this hour after the U.S. got involved directly in the skies over Iran. What have you seen? What have you heard? And what should viewers here in the U.S. be prepared for potentially as far as the warnings of retaliation from the supreme leader and from Iran?
Yeah, not just from Iran, but of course from its proxies. We've already heard from the Houthi rebels inside Yemen that they will respond. They had warned very clearly. Remember, there was an agreement between the Houthi rebels who are backed by Iran and the United States government. It was a unilateral deal that didn't include the Israelis to stop targeting U.S. ships in the region. It is a key waterway. 20% of all oil supplies in the world go through that region, through the Straits of Hormuz, and that is an obvious weapon at the disposal of Iran to potentially respond. But there are a number of targets across the region. You have thousands of U.S. soldiers stationed in Iraq. You have pro-Iranian militias there, the Popular Mobilization Units. You have U.S. soldiers also stationed inside Syria. You have other U.S. bases like Bahrain in the Gulf. So there are potential military targets. There are potential civilian targets. We had been reporting with you that the U.S. military had been evacuating U.S. diplomats and their families, certainly from here in Israel. We know that even before any of this began, there was a downgrading of presence across U.S. Diplomatic missions around the region, that many people had left, and they are on high alert. The U.S. consulate is just down the road here, and I can tell you that security down there has been stepped up for fear that if the United States joined this war, which it now has done, with a warning from the president, not that this was just an isolated act, but that if Tehran does not capitulate, does not come to the table, then there could be further military action. Then those assets, the Iran and its proxies, could potentially attack the US. Now, undoubtedly, the regime is weakened. We were speaking to a senior IDF official who told us that they feel that they have neutralized 50% of all Iran's capacity to fire missiles. But the Israeli Home Front Command, just in the last few minutes, issuing a warning to all Israelis to stay close to their shelters. Do not go to work, do not go to school, prepare for the worst.
And they had slowly begun to allow the economy to come back, communities to come back across Israel. And again, as you mentioned moments ago, Israel informing the people of that country that they're essentially in this sort of emergency moment, waiting to see what the reaction could be from Iran. But Ian, you bring up an excellent point there. In addition to the thousands of American troops, obviously, throughout the region, that everyone back here at home wants to remain very safe in these tense moments, waiting to see if there'll be any reaction from Iran or its proxies. You bring up Iran's air defenses. You bring up proxies, including Hezbollah, significantly weakened. You talk about 50%. We've seen what Israel has done in recent days. We saw what Israel did in response to the October 7th attacks to Hezbollah, of course, north of the border in Israel. Significantly weakened Iran's positioning. And the question is, what do they have left, and what would they risk knowing those three carriers, those U.S. carriers, are in the region? And President Trump's warning tonight that if peace doesn't come quickly, we will act, and we will act quickly.
Yeah, I think the calculation is different under President Trump than it was under President Biden. But even under President Biden, they deployed more military resources to the region to support Israel, first of all in its war with Hamas and then with Hezbollah. It's been actively involved. The U.S. THAAD air defense system has been actively deployed out at sea here, and also air defenses on land to try and intercept these ballistic missiles. Now, 10 to 15% have managed to get through. But I can tell you it's now been many, many hours since anything happened here, and I think people are waiting to see. But all of those proxies have been severely degraded. I mean, since October the 7th, 2023, the entire shape of the Middle East, in particular Israel's enemies, and by extension America's enemies, have been weakened. You've got Hamas, you've got a change of regime in Syria, you've got Hezbollah and the Houthi rebels in Yemen, and we haven't even talked about the Iranian-backed militias in Iraq. They will be a major concern for the U.S. administration and for the Israelis, because they do have the capacity, as we've seen before, to respond to U.S. bases in the region. When General Soleimani was assassinated by the U.S. military, we were in Iraq at the time, and we saw that rockets were fired directly from Iran towards those U.S. bases. So all of that is vulnerable, and the whole idea that the regime in Iran is just going to pack up its bags and say, fine, that's the end of things, I suspect is unlikely at this point. They will have to be seen to respond, but the threat from President Trump is serious. It will be heard loud and clear across the region.
And the other question here tonight, the leadership of Iran and the future of the supreme leader.
Yeah, I mean, undoubtedly they are weakened. Now, it's an authoritarian regime, and as we've seen elsewhere, it lives or dies on its ability to project strength domestically, and that has been weakened. It doesn't control its own skies. Again, a senior Israeli official talking to us just 24 hours ago.
Ian Panel live from Tel Aviv. Ian, stay where you are. We're going to continue our ABC News live coverage. The U.S. directly involved now in Iran. Images from the Situation Room in a moment here of the president and the vice president from their meeting a short time ago.
So this is my thing right here. Trump was saying that we, about to be safe now, or we can have peace. Iran is already, like the man just said, they sent missiles over here before. So now we gotta worry about how they gonna respond, what they gonna respond with, if they going after U.S. troops in Israel, or if they going straight for U.S. I looked up Iran on Google Maps, whatever, just to see where it was at from Israel. Iran is probably a little bigger than the U.S., the whole U.S. Israel, you could fit about 2 or 3 of them in Texas. Why the U.S. is getting involved in Israel? Now, from what I heard, Israel started this. From what I heard, Israel was bombing Iran, Palestine, things like that. Whatever kind of ties U.S. got with Israel, it got to be deep as hell. In my opinion, I think people in the Vatican, the Pope and them, and whoever controls them is running the U.S. I mean, Europeans came over here, took over this country, and that's who runs it to this day. Somebody in Europe, in my opinion. But to bomb, what they did was bomb allegedly 3 nuclear sites in Iran. So I guess they were creating nuclear weapons with uranium, and they bombed those three sites. That's probably something that they've been wanting to do anyway. As they said, U.S. has been gunning for Iran since 1979, when they had some people from the embassy over there kidnapped or held hostage, and they've been basically wanting to get at Iran ever since then. That's over 45 years ago. So it could be just an excuse to go in there. It could be a reason to take the uranium, kind of like when they went in Iraq talking about saving Iraq or rescuing Iraq, and it was totally about some oil. We never know, but it most definitely will put the country at risk. It'll put people at risk. A whole lot of people talking about World War III. We hear that type of talk every time it's wartime. However, you got Russia that's siding with Iran. You got China that's siding with Iran. You got North Korea. So they most definitely are allied up. And now we have to wait and see what kind of response we get from Iran. This has been the Roast Report. Get back with you when I find something new to talk about.